You never realize the moment your life tears in half until it sits in your mailbox. It did not arrive with police sirens or a midnight call. It came on a regular Tuesday, demanding $560,000 for a vacation home I had never seen, past due by 18 months. The worst part was not the money, it was the forged signature, perfectly crafted by the very people who taught me to hold a pen. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Sydney Lopez. I am 34 years old, and I assess disaster for a living. As a financial risk analyst at Apex Meridian Solutions in Seattle, my entire existence revolves around predicting failure. I spend 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, staring at glowing dual monitors in a climate-controlled glass office. I calculate debt-to-income ratios, liquidity metrics, and the precise probability of a corporate default. I find the hidden rot in ledgers. I know exactly when a borrower is going to drown. Numbers are clean. They do not lie. They do not have hidden agendas, and they certainly do not smile at you while stabbing you in the back. I trust numbers. I do not trust people. It was a Tuesday when the numbers turned on me. I had just finished a grueling 9-hour shift dismantling a flawed merger proposal. I took the damp, crowded bus back to my neighborhood, walking the last 4 blocks under the permanent, gray drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. I unlocked the door to my small, one-bedroom rented apartment. The heater was rattling again. The refrigerator hummed a low, annoying note. It was an ordinary, unremarkable evening. I dropped my keys on the counter and flipped through the small stack of mail I had pulled from the lobby box. Circulars, a water bill, and a thick, crisp white envelope from a financial institution I did not recognize, First Heritage Trust Bank. I tore the flap open, expecting a generic credit card pre-approval. Instead, I pulled out a heavy piece of cardstock. It was a formal notice of default and intent to foreclose. I read the document once, then I read it again. My analytical brain, usually so sharp and fast, ground to a complete halt. The letters on the page seemed to detach themselves from the paper, floating in front of my eyes in a nonsensical arrangement. The letter stated, in cold, undeniable print, that I was the primary signatory on a commercial mortgage. The principal balance owed was $560,000. The property attached to the loan was located in Austin, Texas, and the most terrifying detail of all, the account was 18 months past due. I had never been to Austin, Texas. I did not own property. I certainly did not have over $500,000. A heavy, suffocating weight settled on my chest. The walls of my tiny apartment suddenly felt like they were shrinking. My vision blurred at the edges. This was a mistake. It had to be a clerical error, a stolen identity issue, a glitch in the banking matrix. I am a risk analyst. I freeze my credit. I check my reports. This was impossible. I did not panic. Panic is for amateurs. I grabbed my phone, found the customer service number at the bottom of the threatening letter, and dialed. A synthesized voice guided me through an endless maze of automated menus. I pressed 0 repeatedly until the line clicked and a human voice answered. First Heritage Trust. This is Kevin. How may I assist you? My name is Sydney Lopez, I said, my voice dropping into the flat, authoritative tone I used to interrogate corporate executives. I just received a notice of default on an account I did not open. I need the exact origination documents, the property address, and the complete signatory details on this file immediately. Kevin hesitated. Ma'am, I need to verify your identity first. Can I have the last 4 digits of your social security number? I gave them to him. I gave him my birth date. I gave him my current Seattle address. Thank you, Ms. Lopez, Kevin said, his keyboard clacking loudly in my ear. I am pulling up the file. Yes, I see the mortgage here. It is for a commercial residential property located in Travis County, Texas. Read me the DBA or the specific property name, I demanded. My knuckles were white as I gripped the phone. The asset is listed as a boutique hospitality property operating under the name The Oasis Austin. Kevin read, originated exactly 24 months ago. Payment ceased 18 months ago. I did not sign that document, I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the hurricane tearing through my mind. Send me the digital copy of the master promissory note right now, to the email on file. I can initiate that request, Ms. Lopez, but it will take 24 to 48 hours to— Do it, I snapped, and ended the call. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I threw my phone onto the sofa and ripped open my laptop. My hands were shaking so violently, I mistyped the search query twice. The Oasis Austin. I hit enter. The search engine did not give me corporate filings or real estate listings. It gave me social media links. Specifically, it gave me TikTok. I clicked the first video link that appeared. A bright, obnoxiously upbeat pop song blasted through my laptop speakers. The video filled the screen, showing a sweeping drone shot of a sprawling, modern compound with a shimmering infinity pool, string lights, and expensive outdoor furniture. Then, the camera cut to a woman standing by the pool, holding a glass of champagne. She was wearing a designer sundress, her hair perfectly styled, flashing a dazzling practice smile at the lens. It was my younger sister, Chloe. Welcome back to the Oasis Austin, you guys, Chloe squealed into the microphone, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. We are so booked out this season. Building this startup empire from the ground up has been the craziest journey. A man walked into the frame, wrapping his arm around Chloe's waist and kissing her cheek. It was Dexter, her loud, fast-talking, perpetually unemployed fiancé. Dexter looked directly into the camera, adjusting the collar of a shirt that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. When we envisioned this boutique experience, Dexter said, oozing false charisma, we wanted to create a paradise. It took massive vision and incredible financial strategy, but we made it happen. Hard work pays off. Right, babe? Absolutely, Chloe chimed in. Link in bio to book your weekend getaway. I stared at the screen. The video looped. Chloe smiled. Dexter posed. The champagne bubbled. $560,000. My sister. My blood. A cold, creeping nausea rose in my throat. I stumbled backward, hitting the edge of my kitchen counter. I could not breathe. The betrayal was so massive, so incomprehensible, that my brain refused to process it. How could a 25-year-old failed influencer and her deadbeat boyfriend secure a massive commercial loan in my name? Banks require extensive verification. They require notarized signatures. They require physical presence or legally binding representation. Legally binding representation. The thought struck me with the force of a physical blow. The room spun. The memory, buried deep in my subconscious, suddenly clawed its way to the surface with terrifying clarity. 4 years ago. I remembered the sterile, chemical smell of the hospital room. I remembered the blinding fluorescent lights burning into my eyes. I was 30 years old, doubling over in unimaginable agony, a ruptured appendix. Sepsis was setting in. The doctors were rushing me to emergency surgery, telling me there was a significant chance of complications. I remembered my parents, Thomas and Helena Lopez, standing by my bedside. My mother was crying, holding my hand. My father looked pale and terrified. A hospital administrator had stepped into the room holding a clipboard. Ms. Lopez, given the severity of the infection and the general anesthesia, we recommend executing a temporary medical and financial power of attorney. Just in case things go wrong, it gives your parents the authority to make decisions and handle your affairs if you are incapacitated. I was burning with fever. The pain was blinding. I barely looked at the dense legal text. I trusted them. They were my parents. They had raised me. They wept for me as I was wheeled into the operating room. I took the plastic pen from the administrator and scribbled my signature on the bottom line. I survived the surgery. I recovered. I went back to my life, my numbers, my apartment in Seattle. I forgot all about the paperwork. They had not forgotten. They had taken that temporary emergency document, they had kept it, and 2 years later, they had used it. The perfect forged signature on the loan documents was not a forgery at all. It was a legally authorized stroke of the pen, executed by the very people who had taught me how to write my own name. My parents had sold me out to fund my sister's fake luxury lifestyle. They had strapped $500,000 of toxic debt to my back and left me to drown, all while smiling in my face during our weekly Sunday phone calls. I closed my laptop. The sound of the plastic snapping shut echoed in the quiet room. I did not cry. Crying was a useless expenditure of energy. The shock was fading, quickly replaced by something else, something cold, something sharp, something that felt exactly like the risk models I built every single day. They thought I was just the quiet, hard-working daughter across the country. They thought I would panic. They thought I would take the fall to protect the family. They had miscalculated the risk, and I was going to ruin them. I did not go to work on Wednesday morning. At exactly 7 o'clock, I picked up my phone, dialed my department director at Apex Meridian, and told him I was taking 1 full week of personal leave, effective immediately. He asked if I was all right. His voice tinged with the rare concern reserved for his top analysts. I told him I was dealing with a sudden family emergency. It was the truest statement I had ever made. I walked down to the corner store under the gray Seattle sky, the damp air doing nothing to cool the furnace burning inside my chest. I bought 3 pounds of dark roast coffee, a flat of bottled water, and enough dry provisions to sustain me for 7 days. I walked back into my apartment, locked the deadbolt, threw the security chain, and drew the heavy blackout curtains across the windows. I turned on my dual desk lamps. The soft, yellow light cast long shadows against the walls. My living room was no longer a sanctuary. It was a war room. The first rule of risk management is that you do not act on incomplete data. A panicked reaction is a losing reaction. I needed the full, naked truth of my financial existence. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard with the clinical detachment of a surgeon about to make the first incision. I paid the premium fees to bypass the waiting periods and pulled my comprehensive, unfiltered credit reports from all 3 major bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. The progress bars crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. When the heavily encrypted PDF files finally populated on my desktop, I opened them side by side. The numbers did not just tell a story of a single betrayal, they revealed an absolute massacre. The $560,000 commercial mortgage for the Austin property was the largest gaping wound, but it was not the only one. Beneath the massive real estate debt, my eyes locked onto 2 other highly toxic anomalies. There was a business line of credit opened 12 months ago with a maximum limit of $45,000. It was completely maxed out, drawing penalties for over-limit fees. Below that sat a specialized equipment loan for $22,500, originated 8 months ago. Both of these secondary accounts were registered to a limited liability company called the Oasis Ventures, LLC. I ran the total in my head before my fingers even touched the calculator. $627,500. My parents had not just borrowed money to buy my sister a playground. They had systematically, methodically drained every ounce of my impeccable credit score to keep her sinking ship afloat. They had bled me dry from 3 different arteries. They used the power of attorney document like a skeleton key, walking into banking institutions and forging my life away. Every time they needed a cash injection for designer furniture, or pool maintenance, or another round of fake champagne for TikTok, they just signed my name. The paranoia set in, cold and sharp. I looked at the walls of my apartment and wondered who else I was tied to. I checked the public records for tax liens. I searched municipal databases for unpaid contractor invoices. The numbers stared back at me, indifferent and cruel. My blood relatives had constructed a paper guillotine, and the blade was already dropping. I knew the law well enough to know that screaming at my mother over the phone would accomplish absolutely nothing. It would only tip them off. If I confronted them without a titanium-clad legal strategy, they would destroy the evidence, move the remaining assets, and leave me holding the bag. I needed a professional predator. I spent the next 8 hours researching attorneys. I bypassed the standard real estate lawyers and the polite family practice firms. I needed a specialist in consumer protection, financial fraud, and identity theft. I needed someone who understood the unique, sickening psychology of family crimes. That was how I found Marcus Vance. His office was not located in a gleaming downtown high-rise. It was on the second floor of an older brick building in the industrial district, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a defunct printing press. I arrived on Thursday afternoon. Marcus was a man in his late 50s with tired eyes, a perpetually loosened tie, and a desk buried under mountains of red rope legal folders. He looked like a man who had spent 3 decades staring at the absolute worst of human nature and was entirely unimpressed by it. I sat across from him and handed over a perfectly organized, color-coded binder containing the mortgage documents, the credit reports, the LLC filings, and the expired medical power of attorney. I did not cry. I did not shake. I presented my ruined life to him as if it were a corporate merger gone hostile. Marcus spent 20 minutes reading through the binder in complete silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a cheap wall clock and the rustle of paper. Finally, he closed the binder, laced his fingers together, and looked at me. "Family fraud is the absolute messiest kind of fraud," Marcus said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "It is messy because the banks do not want to be the arbiters of domestic disputes. Your parents had a legally binding document. Yes, the intent of that document was temporary medical emergency use, but the wording was broad enough that a careless loan officer accepted it. On paper, it looks like you authorized your agents to act on your behalf." "It was 4 years ago," I countered, my voice flat. "I was in the hospital. I have not spoken to them about business, ever. They hid the mail. They rerouted the billing addresses to a P.O. box in Texas." "I believe you," Marcus said, "but the police will need more than your word against theirs. White-collar detectives hate cases where a power of attorney is involved. The defense will argue that you were a silent partner in the business, that the venture failed, and now you are claiming fraud to avoid the debt." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. "So how do I prove they knew exactly what they were doing?" Marcus leaned forward, his tired eyes suddenly glinting with a sharp, dangerous intelligence. "We need them to admit it, or, at the very least, we need them to admit they are hiding the financial reality from you. We need to establish criminal intent and deceptive practices. You need to call them. You need to sound exactly like the loving, oblivious daughter they think you are. And you are going to record every single second of it." I left his office with a microscopic digital audio recorder and a heavy sinking feeling in my gut. I spent all of Friday and Saturday pacing my apartment, rehearsing the conversation. I practiced softening my tone. I practiced smiling while I spoke. Knowing the physical act of smiling changes the timbre of your voice, I had to become the perfect victim. On Sunday evening, precisely at 6 o'clock, I initiated the standard weekly family phone call. I plugged the digital recorder into the auxiliary port of my phone, pressed the red button, and dialed my parents' home number in Ohio. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hello." "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was sickeningly bright, a pitch-perfect imitation of a carefree daughter. "Sydney, sweetheart," Helena Lopez answered. Her voice was warm, dripping with that maternal affection that I now knew was nothing but a weaponized performance. "Your father and I were just talking about you. How is the rain in Seattle?" "Still raining," I chuckled. The sound felt like broken glass in my throat. "Work has been incredibly busy. Just looking at risk models all day. How are things back home? How is Dad's garden?" We spent 8 agonizing minutes discussing tomato plants, the neighbor's new fence, and my father's mild arthritis. Every word she spoke was coded in ordinary, mundane reality. It was terrifying how easily she wore the mask. She was chatting with the daughter whose financial throat she had slit, and her heart rate probably had not even elevated. I took a slow, silent breath and pivoted the conversation. "I was actually looking at my vacation time for the end of the year," I said, keeping my tone entirely casual. "I saw one of Chloe's videos pop up on my feed. The oasis looks amazing. I was thinking maybe I should fly down to Texas and book a weekend. See what she and Dexter have built." There was a pause on the line. It was only 2 seconds long, but to an analyst trained to spot anomalies, those 2 seconds were a massive, flashing red siren. "Oh, well," Helena stammered slightly, the warm rhythm of her voice stumbling. "That is a lovely thought, Sydney, but they are incredibly busy right now. The hospitality industry is just so demanding." "I am sure they could squeeze me in," I pressed gently, injecting a fake pout into my voice. "It looks so successful. All those bookings. They must be making a fortune." "Well, you know how social media is," Helena said. Her voice dropped half an octave, taking on a hushed, conspiratorial tone. "Things always look a little brighter on camera. To be perfectly honest, Dexter is having just a little cash flow trouble right now. Growing pains. You know the contractors are expensive, and the taxes in Austin are higher than they expected. It is just a minor cash flow issue." "A cash flow issue?" I asked, feigning innocent concern. "Do they need help? Should I call Chloe?" No, absolutely not," Helena said, her voice suddenly sharp and panicked. "Do not call Chloe. She is stressed enough. Your father and I are handling it. We are helping them figure out the paperwork. Just focus on your job. Sweetheart, everything in Texas is completely under control." "Okay, Mom," I said softly. "If you say so, tell Dad I love him." "We love you too, sweetheart. Talk next Sunday." The line clicked dead. I stopped the recording. My hands were perfectly still. She had handed me the exact weapon I needed. She admitted Dexter was failing. She admitted she and my father were handling the paperwork. And she explicitly told me to stay away from Texas. First thing Monday morning, I was back in Marcus Vance's office. I played the audio file for him. He listened, his eyes closed, nodding slowly to the rhythm of my mother's lies. "It is a beautiful piece of evidence," Marcus said, opening his eyes. "It establishes that they are actively managing the distressed asset and deliberately concealing the financial distress from you. It destroys the silent partner defense." "So we go to the police?" I asked. "Not yet," Marcus replied, pulling a thick stack of printed papers from his desk. "Because while you were playing family therapist, I was doing some forensic digging into the Oasis Ventures LLC, and what I found turns this from a simple wire fraud case into a federal money laundering operation." He spread the papers across the desk. They were banking ledgers, obtained through a private investigator's database scrape of public utility and vendor payments linked to the property address. "The notice you received stated the mortgage was 18 months past due," Marcus explained, pointing his pen at a column of numbers. "But I pulled the Airbnb and VRBO historical booking data for the Oasis Austin. For the past 18 months, that property has maintained an 85% occupancy rate. At their listed nightly prices, they are generating roughly $20,000 a month in gross revenue." I stared at the numbers. My analytical brain kicked into high gear, processing the data at lightning speed. If they are making $20,000 a month, why have they not paid a single dime on the mortgage in a year and a half, even with operating expenses? They should be able to cover the primary debt service. "Exactly," Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. "They are in foreclosure not because the business failed to generate cash. They are in foreclosure because they are intentionally bleeding the business dry. They are taking the revenue, dodging the bank, and preparing to let the property collapse." "Where is the money going?" I demanded. Marcus slid a final piece of paper toward me. It was a printout of an obscure corporate filing. "Dexter set up a secondary shell company in Wyoming. The booking platforms pay the Oasis Ventures LLC in Texas. The Texas LLC immediately transfers the gross profits to the Wyoming shell as a consulting fee, and from Wyoming, the money is being aggressively converted." "Converted into what?" "Cryptocurrency," Marcus said heavily. Specifically, an unhosted, offshore digital wallet. They are taking the cash generated by your stolen credit, converting it into untraceable digital assets, and hoarding it. When the bank finally forecloses on the Austin house, they will walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars in clean, untraceable crypto. The bank gets a depreciated property, and you get a destroyed life and a massive tax penalty for the forgiven debt. I sat back in my chair. The sheer audacity of the scheme was breathtaking. They were not just foolish, desperate people trying to help a daughter. They were systematic thieves. Dexter was the architect. Chloe was the face, and my parents were the willing executioners who provided the weapon. The bank is moving to auction the house in 30 days, Marcus said quietly. Once that property is auctioned, the paper trail becomes incredibly difficult to unravel, and the crypto will vanish forever. If you want to stop them, you cannot do it from a desk in Seattle. I looked at the documents on the desk. I thought about my mother's sweet, poisonous voice on the phone. I thought about my sister drinking champagne by a pool paid for with my future. I need to go to Texas, I said. It was not a question. You need to go to Texas, Marcus agreed. I will draft the legal affidavits here. You need to walk into the Financial Crimes Unit of the Texas Department of Public Safety with a neatly wrapped package, but more importantly, you need to look them in the eye. I stood up. The cold, analytical fear that had gripped me for the past week was entirely gone. In its place was a sharp, crystalline fury. I went back to my apartment, packed a single hard-shell suitcase, and booked a one-way ticket to Austin. The risk analysis was complete. It was time to execute the collapse. The heat hit me the physical moment I stepped out of the automatic sliding doors at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. It was not the damp, polite chill of the Seattle weather I was accustomed to. It was an aggressive, suffocating wave of 95-degree Texas humidity that instantly clung to my skin and made it difficult to draw a full breath. I did not care. The furnace outside perfectly matched the cold fury burning inside my chest. I walked straight past the crowds of tourists and businessmen to the rental car counter. I asked the clerk for the most unremarkable, invisible vehicle they had on the lot. 20 minutes later, I was behind the wheel of a faded gray mid-size sedan with standard plates, merging onto Highway 71. My destination was tucked away in the scenic, winding hills of Travis County. I navigated the steep inclines and sharp turns until the GPS indicated I was less than a mile away. I slowed the car down to a crawl. I found a dusty, unpaved shoulder on an access road, exactly 50 yards across from the main wrought iron gate of the property. I parked the car under the shade of a massive oak tree, turned off the engine, and cracked the windows just a fraction of an inch to let the air circulate without drawing any attention. I reached into my passenger seat and picked up the digital telephoto camera I had purchased specifically for this exact operation. I pressed the power button, lifted the heavy lens to my eye, and focused on the gates. Through the polished glass of the lens, the reality of my ruined financial life came into sharp, agonizing focus. The Oasis. Austin was a sprawling, modern architectural marvel of floor-to-ceiling glass and dark, stained wood, perched elegantly on a limestone ridge. It looked exactly like the paradise they advertised on social media. But as I zoomed in closer, past the gates and onto the property itself, the ugly truth hiding behind the glossy facade became glaringly obvious. The expensive landscaping they flaunted online was actually patchy, brown, and dying in the corners where the camera angles usually could not reach. The water in the infinity pool lacked that pristine, chemical sparkle. I sat in the sweltering heat of the parked car for 3 straight hours. I drank warm bottled water and meticulously documented the slow, pathetic demise of my own stolen empire. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a rusted, unmarked white work van pulled up to the service entrance near the side of the main house. 2 men wearing paint-splattered shirts and worn denim stepped out. Seconds later, Dexter emerged from the side door, even from 50 yards away. Looking through a camera lens, I could feel the frantic, arrogant energy radiating from him. He was waving his hands wildly, pointing aggressively at a section of the roof, and clearly shouting at the contractors. I pressed the shutter button repeatedly, the camera clicking rapidly in the quiet car, capturing every moment of the exchange. I could not hear the specific words, but his body language screamed of unpaid invoices, broken promises, and cheap, under-the-table labor disputes. He was bullying men who were just trying to earn an honest day of wages, all while he was secretly hoarding the cryptocurrency he had siphoned from my stolen identity. 15 minutes later, the contractors left in disgust. Dexter stormed back inside. A short while after that, Chloe walked out onto the expansive rear wooden deck. She was wearing a flowing white linen designer dress, holding a perfectly arranged tropical fruit platter. She set up a tall ring light, checked her makeup in the screen of her phone, adjusted her hair, and hit record. I watched through the telephoto lens as her face completely transformed. The sullen, bored expression she wore a moment prior vanished instantly. It was replaced by a radiant, artificial joy that had successfully garnered her hundreds of thousands of followers. She twirled the skirt of her dress, laughed brightly at the empty air, and held up a piece of pineapple as if presenting a rare gemstone to her audience. It was an absolute masterclass in deception. My sister was selling a luxury lifestyle built entirely on a foundation of felony fraud. She was standing on a deck that the bank was legally preparing to repossess in less than 30 days, acting as if she owned the world. I snapped 24 photos of her performance. These specific images would not go into the legal binder for the authorities. They were solely for me. They were a visual, permanent reminder to never, ever feel a single ounce of guilt for what I was preparing to do to my own blood. I lowered the camera, put the car in gear, and drove back toward the city center. I did not stop for lunch. I did not check into my hotel room. I drove directly to the sprawling, highly secured concrete complex that housed the Texas Department of Public Safety. I navigated the sterile, brightly lit corridors until I reached the heavy glass doors of the Financial Crimes Unit. I approached the front desk, handed my driver license to the uniformed officer on duty, and stated my business clearly. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a windowless, soundproofed interview room with Detective Sarah Jenkins. She was a seasoned investigator in her late 40s, possessing sharp, unblinking eyes and a rigid posture that suggested she had absolutely no patience for frivolous complaints or emotional outbursts. I unzipped my bag and placed Marcus Vance's meticulously organized, color-coded binder squarely on the metal table. I slid it across the surface until it rested in front of her. "My name is Sydney Lopez," I said, my voice perfectly steady, maintaining the flat, authoritative tone I used in corporate boardrooms. "I am here to formally report a multi-layered identity theft, aggravated bank fraud, and a suspected money laundering operation totaling exactly $627,500. The perpetrators are actively utilizing a commercial property located within your direct jurisdiction." Detective Jenkins raised a single eyebrow, opened the thick binder, and began to read. I sat in absolute silence for the next 45 minutes. The only sound in the room was the hum of the overhead ventilation system and the crisp turning of pages. I watched her eyes meticulously track the forged mortgage documents, the Texas corporate filings, the offshore crypto transfer logs my attorney had discovered, and the printed photographs I had taken just 2 hours earlier. Finally, she stopped at the modified power of attorney document. She traced the blatantly altered expiration date with the tip of her silver pen. "This is an exceptionally comprehensive file, Ms. Lopez," Detective Jenkins said, her tone shifting from routine skepticism to deadly professional seriousness. "The physical alteration on the medical directive is somewhat amateurish, but coupled with the broad legal language, it was clearly enough to fool a careless loan officer who was eager to close a massive commercial real estate deal. However, I need to be perfectly clear with you before we take another step forward." She closed the heavy binder and folded her hands on top of it, locking her eyes onto mine. "The primary suspects explicitly listed in your attorney's sworn affidavit are Thomas Lopez and Helena Lopez, your biological parents." "That is correct," I replied without blinking. If I formally open this case and input this into our system, it immediately leaves my hands and escalates straight to the federal level, Detective Jenkins explained, leaning forward to ensure I understood the gravity of the situation. This is not a simple civil dispute over a misunderstood family loan. The use of interstate electronic banking systems to secure $500,000 based on a forged signature constitutes federal wire fraud. Furthermore, the systematic routing of the legitimate rental income into unhosted, untraceable cryptocurrency wallets constitutes federal money laundering. These are severe, mandatory minimum offenses. She paused, letting the heavy, suffocating weight of the law hang in the quiet room. People come into this office angry all the time, she continued softly, her voice carrying years of hard experience. They want to use the police department to scare their family members into paying them back. But once I file this official paperwork, you cannot take it back. You cannot change your mind when the reality sets in and things get incredibly ugly. The federal government will seize the Austin property. They will freeze every single bank account tied to your parents and your sister, and they will arrest them, if convicted. Your parents are not looking at a slap on the wrist or probation. They are looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Are you absolutely certain you want to pull this trigger on your own family? I looked down at the closed binder resting on the table. I thought about the 18 months of past due foreclosure notices deliberately hidden in a secret post office box. I thought about the hundreds of thousands of dollars aggressively shifted into the dark web while I worked 12-hour shifts under fluorescent office lights to build my career. I thought about my mother laughing on the phone with me, asking about the Seattle rain, while she actively held the knife in my back. I thought about the perfect, practiced signature she had used to casually sign away my entire future. "Where do I sign the complaint?" I asked. Detective Jenkins studied my face for a long, silent moment. She searched for hesitation, for regret, for any sign of weakness. She found absolutely nothing. She nodded slowly, slid a formal, carbon-copied complaint form across the metal table, and handed me her pen. I took the pen. I did not let my hand shake. I signed my name on the bottom line, the real signature, the one that was officially going to burn their fake empire to the ground. I left the police station, drove to my hotel in the downtown district, checked into my room, and took a long shower to wash the Texas dust off my skin. I ordered a glass of wine from room service and sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at the screen of my phone. The legal machinery was already in motion. Detective Jenkins had assured me the formal arrest warrants would be drafted and approved by a judge by Monday morning. They would be executed in a synchronized raid, coordinating with the local county authorities in Ohio to apprehend my parents, and the local Austin police to secure my sister and Dexter at the property. But I was absolutely not going to let them be surprised by men in tactical windbreakers banging on their doors at dawn. That was too easy. I wanted to see their faces when the grand illusion finally shattered. I wanted them to look across a dinner table and slowly realize that the quiet, compliant, oblivious daughter they had bled dry was the exact same person holding the execution order. I opened the messaging application on my phone. I navigated to the group text thread labeled Family. The very last message in the history was a photograph my mother had sent 2 days ago of a homemade casserole she had baked for my father. I typed carefully, ensuring my tone was flawless. "Hi, Mom, Dad, and Chloe. I have some absolutely incredible news. My firm just awarded me a massive, unexpected financial bonus for successfully closing a major corporate risk assessment portfolio. It is life-changing money. Mom, I know you mentioned on the phone that Dexter was having some minor cash flow issues with the Oasis. I really want to help you guys out." I waited a deliberate beat, staring at the cursor, then continued typing. "I just flew into Austin this afternoon. I want to celebrate together and discuss making a significant cash investment in the business to clear up any debts you have. I have booked a private dining room at the Capitol Grill downtown for tomorrow night at exactly 7 o'clock. My treat. Completely. Please tell me you can all make it. Mom and Dad. I already booked your first-class flights from Ohio. The confirmation numbers are sitting in your email inbox right now. I love you all so much." I hit send. I tossed the phone onto the mattress beside me and took a slow sip of my wine. It did not even take a full 60 seconds for the screen to illuminate the darkened room. Chloe replied first, a rapid barrage of text. "Oh my God. Sydney, you are amazing. Yes, Dexter and I are so there. This is the best news ever." 3 minutes later, my mother texted the group. "Sweetheart, your father and I are literally in tears right now. You are such an incredible blessing to this family. We are packing our bags right this second. We absolutely cannot wait to see you tomorrow night." I sat in the quiet, air-conditioned hotel room, listening to the low hum of the ventilation. They were coming. They were frantically packing bags and flying across the country, fueled entirely by the greedy, desperate delusion that I was going to hand them even more of my hard-earned money to save their sinking ship. They honestly thought they had won. They thought their secret was perfectly safe. They had absolutely no idea that the luxury dinner was already paid for, and so was the trap. The private dining room at the Capitol Grill was a masterpiece of suffocating luxury. Heavy mahogany paneled walls absorbed the sound of the main restaurant, isolating us in a quiet, temperature-controlled vault. A massive crystal chandelier cast a warm, golden glow over the long table set with imported white linen, polished silver, and sparkling crystal wine glasses. I sat at the head of the table, sipping sparkling water with a twist of lemon, watching the door. My parents arrived first. They had flown in directly from a spontaneous vacation in Miami, their skin tanned and their smiles wide, radiating the carefree energy of people spending money that did not belong to them. My mother, Helena, wore a silk blouse and a new diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light of the chandelier. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around my neck, engulfing me in a cloud of expensive perfume. My father, Thomas, patted my shoulder firmly, his eyes already scanning the high-end menu. 10 minutes later, Chloe and Dexter made their grand entrance. Chloe was draped in a designer cocktail dress, carrying a leather handbag that cost more than my monthly rent in Seattle. Dexter wore a custom-tailored suit minus the tie, projecting the exact image of a Silicon Valley disruptor. They both hugged me tightly, their faces glowing with sheer, unadulterated greed. They were all completely convinced that the wealthy, boring, corporate sister was about to hand them a massive bailout check. We ordered the most expensive items on the menu. Dexter took it upon himself to order 2 bottles of a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass and holding it up to the light as if he were a master sommelier. "To family," Dexter proclaimed, raising his glass high, "and to incredible financial milestones. Sydney, we are so incredibly proud of your little corporate bonus. You have always been the hardest worker." "Hear, hear," my father echoed, taking a generous swallow of his wine. For the next 45 minutes, I sat in total silence and watched them perform. It was a flawless, terrifying display of collective delusion. They ate dry-aged ribeye steaks and butter-poached lobster tails, wiping their mouths with linen napkins while they enthusiastically praised the spectacular success of the Oasis Austin. Chloe talked endlessly about her viral engagement metrics and the brand deals she was supposedly negotiating. Dexter bragged about his visionary approach to real estate disruption. Then, my father turned his attention to me, leaning back in his leather chair with a patronizing smile. "You know, Sydney," Thomas said, swirling the last 2 inches of wine in his glass, "you really should look at what your sister has built here. You are smart, but you are stuck in that cubicle up in Seattle, working your life away for someone else. You analyze risk all day long, but you never actually take any risks. You need to step out of your comfort zone. Quit that boring corporate job. Maybe Dexter can show you the ropes, teach you a little bit about how real wealth is generated." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had held my hand while I was wheeled into emergency surgery, the man who had calmly taken my legally binding signature and used it to slit my financial throat. "You are absolutely right, Dad," I said. My voice was eerily calm, cutting through the warm, drunken atmosphere of the room like a scalpel. "I do analyze risk for a living. I look for anomalies. I look for hidden liabilities. and I found a massive one. I reached down to the floor and picked up the heavy leather tote bag sitting beside my chair. I unzipped the main compartment. I did not pull out a checkbook. I pulled out 3 thick, heavy, color-coded folders. I raised my arm and slammed the folders down onto the center of the mahogany table. The sharp, violent thud rattled the crystal glasses and silenced the room instantly. "What is this?" Dexter asked, his arrogant smile faltering slightly. "That is my risk analysis," I replied. Leaning forward and resting my forearms on the table, I looked directly at my sister. Folder number 1 is the official notice of default and intent to foreclose from First Heritage Trust Bank. It clearly outlines a debt of $560,000 for a property located in Travis County, currently 18 months past due. Chloe dropped her silver fork. It clattered loudly against her porcelain plate. All the color drained from her perfectly contoured face. "Folder number 2, I continued, my voice entirely devoid of emotion, "contains my comprehensive credit reports. It details the maxed-out $45,000 business line of credit and the $22,500 equipment loan you fraudulently opened under the Oasis Ventures. It also traces the direct routing of gross rental income into an offshore, unhosted cryptocurrency wallet." Dexter stopped breathing. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned completely white. "And folder number 3, I said softly, sliding the final document out from under the pile. It was a heavy piece of paper bearing the official seal of the state of Texas. "That is a sworn, stamped felony complaint filed directly with the Financial Crimes Unit of the Texas Department of Public Safety. It details a multi-layered conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." The temperature in the room plummeted. The silence was absolute, suffocating, and heavy with the sudden, crushing weight of reality. The illusion was dead. Chloe was the first to break. Her lower lip trembled, and a loud, ugly sob ripped from her throat. The poised, untouchable influencer vanished, replaced by a terrified, cornered child. "Sydney, please," Chloe cried, tears immediately ruining her flawless makeup. "I did not know anything. I swear to God. I did not know. Dexter handled all the banking. Mom and Dad did all the paperwork. They told me the investors had it covered. I just ran the social media. I did not sign anything." "Shut your mouth, Chloe," Dexter barked, his face flushing a deep, furious crimson. He slammed his fist onto the table. Rattling the plates again, he pointed a trembling finger at my face. "You listen to me, you vindictive bitch. You cannot prove any of this. I will hire the best defense attorneys in the state. I will countersue you for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and slander. I will drag you through civil court until you are completely bankrupt." "You cannot hire a defense attorney, Dexter," I said, offering him a cold, empty smile, "because as of 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, the federal government is freezing every single bank account tied to your name, the LLC, and the shell company in Wyoming. You are entirely broke." My mother pushed her chair back, her face pale and shining with cold sweat. She rushed around the table, falling to her knees beside my chair. She desperately grabbed my hand, her diamond bracelet digging into my skin. "Sydney, my beautiful girl, please," Helena begged, her voice cracking as she openly wept. "We are your family. I carried you in my womb. We raised you. We paid for your college. We made a terrible mistake, but we were just trying to help your sister get on her feet. You cannot do this. You cannot send your own mother and father to a federal prison. Please, you have to call the police and withdraw that paper. Have some mercy. I am begging you." I looked down at her. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sadness. Just the cold, sterile satisfaction of a balanced ledger. I forcefully pulled my hand out of her grasp. "You used my medical emergency," I stated plainly, my voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "I was fighting a systemic infection, and you used it as an opportunity to steal $500,000. Do not ever speak to me about mercy." "You selfish, ungrateful brat." My father exploded. Thomas stood up so violently, His heavy wooden chair crashed backward onto the carpet. His face was contorted in pure, unhinged rage. The polite, patronizing father figure was completely gone, revealing the arrogant, entitled thief hiding underneath. "We gave you everything," Thomas screamed, his voice raw and echoing in the confined space. "You owed us. You make six figures sitting in a comfortable chair while your sister was struggling to survive. Yes, I used the damn power of attorney. I signed your name because it was the only way to secure the future of this family. You had the pristine credit, and you were not doing anything useful with it. I did what I had to do as the head of this family, and I would do it again." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. The small, red recording icon stopped blinking. The audio file was saved and instantly uploaded to my secure cloud server. "Thank you, Dad," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "Detective Jenkins will find that confession incredibly helpful." I picked up my purse, turned my back on the screaming, crying, shattered remains of my family, and walked toward the heavy mahogany doors. The dinner was officially over. The days following the dinner in Austin were a brutal, methodical dismantling of a criminal enterprise, faced with the terrifying, undeniable reality of a federal prison cell. Thomas and Helena Lopez completely collapsed. They had no loyalty left for the man who had stolen their life savings. They fully cooperated with Detective Jenkins and the federal prosecutors. They sat in sterile interrogation rooms and confessed to every single detail, officially admitting to forging my signature on the medical power of attorney and detailing exactly how Dexter had manipulated them into the cryptocurrency wipeout. With their sworn confessions and the official court ruling of aggravated identity theft, my attorney Marcus Vance unleashed a relentless legal assault on First Heritage Trust Bank. The bank had no choice but to completely sever the $560,000 mortgage from my identity. The maxed-out business lines and the fraudulent equipment loans were entirely expunged from my record. It took 6 grueling months of bureaucratic warfare, but my financial identity was finally resurrected. My credit score climbed steadily back to its original, immaculate state of 815. The Oasis. Austin met a swift and unceremonious end. The bank seized the property and auctioned it off to a corporate holding company for a mere fraction of its inflated value. The shimmering infinity pool was drained. The luxury patio furniture was repossessed by creditors. Chloe's artificial social media empire imploded overnight when the criminal indictments became public knowledge online. Sponsors dropped her. Followers turned on her. Stripped of her fake wealth and the man who funded it, she was evicted. Legal documents showed her new address was a dilapidated, run-down apartment complex on the dusty outskirts of the city. She was forced to take a job working grueling double shifts as a waitress at a local diner. Finally forced to learn the actual, heavy cost of a single dollar. Dexter faced the full, crushing weight of the justice system. The federal forensic accountants discovered that my family was not his only victim. He had orchestrated similar fraudulent crypto schemes, targeting at least a dozen other vulnerable people across 3 different states. The federal judge presiding over his case was utterly merciless. Dexter was convicted of multiple counts of wire fraud and money laundering, receiving a sentence of 7 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early release. My parents managed to avoid wearing prison uniforms, but their survival came at a devastating cost. In exchange for their full cooperation and considering their complete financial ruin, the prosecutors offered a plea deal for leniency. They escaped jail time, but they were hit with massive federal penalties. Their retirement fund was permanently gone. They were forced to sell their comfortable suburban home in Ohio just to pay their defense attorneys. Today, the people who once thought they could play God with my future are living in a tiny, state-subsidized, low-income housing unit, relying entirely on monthly Social Security checks and food assistance to survive the rest of their miserable lives. 1 year later, I sit in my new, expansive corner office on the 40th floor of the Apex Meridian building in downtown Seattle. I was promoted to Senior Director of Risk Assessment just weeks after returning from Texas. The familiar, comforting gray rain beats gently against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. My desk is immaculate, The numbers on my dual monitors are clean, honest, and perfectly balanced. My personal cell phone lights up on the edge of the desk. The screen displays a text message notification from an unsaved number with an Ohio area code. I open the message. It is a massive, rambling block of text. I recognize my mother's dramatic, manipulative cadence immediately. She is apologizing profusely. She is talking about blood and forgiveness and how much my father misses my voice. She is begging for a second chance, pleading for me to just call them one single time. I read the words carefully. My heart rate does not elevate by a single beat. My breathing remains perfectly steady. I do not frown, and I do not feel even a microscopic shred of guilt or sorrow. They are just empty words from strangers I used to know. I tap the screen twice, delete, block. I set the phone face down on the polished mahogany wood, pick up my pen, and return to my risk models with a deep, peaceful smile. The cancerous rot has been completely excised. I am safe, I am secure, and I am entirely in control of my own life. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Helena Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.